so real to me. We can't change history, but we can change. We can change our destiny. So sweet like lemonade. I still remember that taste. Your memory don't fade, and I never forgot your face. History comes back around to meet me again. Champagne, I had some plans, but they just changed. What a shame, what a shame. Can't change history, but we can change. Yeah, we can change it.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Well, it's a day after my birthday. It is January the 9th, JC. I can tell you one thing. I'm supposed to be on this diet. What did they get me before I went into the hospital again last night? They got me a chocolate cake. It was cream-filled.
Gee, yeah, here's a heart attack with a side of stroke. I mean, come on, you're on a diet on top of that.
And I ate a piece of it, and I felt really guilty a couple of hours later.
Yeah, I bet. They should have got you, I don't know, a piece of celery maybe with a candle on it. Jeez.
Well, for dinner last night, I had these rolls. It had a little bit of turkey in it, or chicken in it, I should say, and it was carrots, and it had lettuce in it, and it had cabbage in it. And all the vegetables were raw in it, and it tasted really good.
Yeah, that sounds like one of them wraps. Those are pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I mean, compared to TV dinners, it was fantastic. Well, tonight, my heart goes out to everybody in L.A. County, Malibu, Hollywood, and the surrounding areas who lost so much in these horrible fires that's going on. My thoughts go out with you tonight, and to all the families and the communities that have been affected by these wildfires. I'm sending you the strength, support your way in this incredibly difficult time. The destruction of these fires is so unimaginable. And I want to acknowledge the bravery of all the first responders and all the people in the neighborhoods that have pulled together to try to save everything that they have worked on and worked for. Let's take a moment tonight for all those people that lost their homes, their businesses, and their memories in these fires. You're not alone, and we're all pulling for you. And have you looked on what is really interesting? It really turned my stomach. And I went on X today, and boy, did I get a lot of comments. If you go on TikTok, back when all these drones were going, right? People were posting all these drones like mad. But you think people were really posting much on TikTok about what these wildfires are going on in Malibu and LA County and what these people are going through? Even the helicopter pilots risking their lives, dipping into people's swimming pools to try to get water to douse these fires. And people are, they're more interested in drones, evidently, than what's going on with humanity.
Yeah, it's one thing after another, and of course they always distract you with something else. But it's true. You know how it is. It's like when people driving down the road and there's a wreck, they got to see that, and instead of maybe getting out and helping somebody.
But it's shocking.
Yeah.
Again, have you looked on the news and seen what these people are going through? It is absolutely horrible. I was talking to actor Thomas Jane today, who's a regular on our show. And even he's lucky his house so far hasn't been touched, but he knows a lot of actors, for example, that they lost everything.
Yeah, listen, those fires is no joke. As a matter of fact, I believe, from what I heard, that they cut some of the funding, so the water's not. They don't have efficient enough water or manpower.
That's why they were diving into people's swimming pools for water with buckets. Anthony Hopkins, the famous actor, lost his whole house this morning.
Yeah, and of course, hopefully he got insurance. But we're talking not. You say a house, but their garage is the size of most people's house.
Yeah, but the bad thing is, just last month, a lot of the major insurance companies canceled people's policies in that area.
Yeah, what did they know that we didn't? That's kind of
because it's fire season.
Yeah, isn't that some of these companies that you got to have, we're going to help pay, and then they do everything they can to not pay.
Yeah, well, have a heart attack and find out.
Yeah,
but again, I'm just surprised that people out there just haven't opened their eyes, because it could happen everywhere. Also announced on the news today, off of Oregon coast, out in the ocean, there's a huge volcano about 2 miles down. And scientists say that there's a very strong chance that it could erupt in 2025. You remember what Dr. Miller said about that volcano, don't you?
I do. And matter of fact, there's a whole, what do they call it? There's a whole chain of them out there in the ocean. But yeah, that one you're talking about is a little bit bigger.
Well, Dr. Miller, suggested very easily, if that ever went off, everything from, I-5 to the ocean could be kind of wet.
Yeah, it could cause a whole chain reaction. Then you'd be in hot water for sure.
Well, no, you're not going to be in hot water.
I wouldn't be.
No, you never know about Ohio, too. Yellowstone's doing some weird stuff, too, if you haven't been keeping up with the news.
Yeah, it's a super volcano, but unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to control it. That's what's the scary part about it.
Yeah, could you imagine you have a house off of I-5 and you're fishing off your deck? Not for cod or anything like that, maybe for shark.
Yeah, maybe, listen, there's a lot going on out there, especially off the coast of Oregon, like you're saying.
Yeah, a lot of things are going on. So, again, if you live in California and you have any relatives in that area, check up on them, make sure they're fine. That would be the smartest thing you could do for yourself, for peace of mind, and to let your loved ones know.
Definitely.
Well, tonight we're going to have a great show. Right after Guy Ticker with the news, we're going to be talking about exoplanets with Dr. Jason. So stay tuned. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. For more information about our guests tonight and tomorrow, just go to our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Here's Guy Ticker with the news.
Diving into the headlines of the mysterious and unexplained, this is The Unseen News with Guy Ticker, where the extraordinary is just the beginning. Small satellite constellation could reveal black holes like never before. Researchers in South Korea are developing a constellation of satellites that could reveal what goes on in the vicinity of supermassive black holes. The constellation, dubbed Kepler, is a brainchild of Seoul National University astronomy professor Sasha Tripp. An expert in black holes, Tripp has grown frustrated with the limitations of humanity's existing instruments for observing black holes, and is concerned that unless major technological advances are made, research may soon reach a dead end. when the first ever image of a supermassive black hole, the one at the center of the Messier 87 galaxy, some 55 million light years away from Earth, was revealed to the world in 2019, it caused a sensation. It showed a glowing ring of the shape of a donut, enclosing an eerie dark spot. It confirmed that black holes, those mind-boggling hotspots of gravity so potent that even light can't escape from them, indeed exist. In 2022, an image of the black hole at the center of our own galaxy, the Milky Way, followed. As captivating as these images are, for researchers like Tripp, they are nowhere near perfect. And so, the alarm has been sounded. And that wraps up tonight's top news story. I'm Guy Ticker on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network.
And now, a little information about our guest.
Dr. Jason Steffen is an associate professor of physics at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. His work is primarily on the properties, formation, and dynamical evolution of planets and planetary systems. He was a longtime member of the science team for NASA's Kepler mission, where he contributed to the discovery and characterization of thousands of planets and planetary systems. Dr. Steffen is the author of the book Hidden in the Heavens, available from Princeton University Press. Prior to joining UNLV, he was research faculty at Northwestern University and the Brinson Postdoctoral Fellow at the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory near Chicago, Illinois. Dr. Steffen received his PhD and MS in physics at the University of Washington, Seattle, and his bachelor's degree in mathematics and physics from Weber State University in Utah.
Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Jason. How are you doing this Thursday night?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you were mentioning, too, where you're at in California, there's like a lot of like ash and all that. How's the air content? Is it hard to go out there and breathe?
It wasn't so bad. I've been in worse places, but you can definitely smell it, smell the fires, and there was a bit of ash coming down downtown just because of the direction that the wind is blowing. But there's fires popping up all over the place. When I first came down, there was just the Palisades fire, and then by the end of my drive from Las Vegas into Los Angeles, there were others that had already sprung up.
Yeah, really fast. I got to ask you a question, Doctor. What got you into science? How old were you when you were interested in the stars and all that type of stuff?
I guess I was always interested, but one of the things that really tipped the scales for me was when the Hubble Space Telescope launched. So I was in high school when it started sending back pictures as out of focus as they were, or as blurry as they were still pretty incredible. And so through my high school years and early college, the Hubble Space Telescope really was producing a lot of amazing images that kind of pushed me over the edge to go into physics and astronomy.
What do you think there is of life out there? Again, there's, the Congress, a whole bunch of people, really pushing for disclosure on UAPs. Well, let me correct myself. UFOs, flying discs, flying saucers, or whatever they are, they're really pushing it. So, are these maybe man, or is there a chance with all these planets out there that life could exist?
I think in the case of the things that we see on the Earth, it's probably unlikely that they're coming from other stars, just because of how big the distances are between stars. Do I think that there's life on other planets? I certainly wouldn't be surprised if there was life on other planets, considering how many planets we've discovered and what that implies for planets that are orbiting other stars.
I've had Dr. Michio Kaku on the show, and he said, there is like how can you say, like a tunnel out there, which you could maybe travel from one galaxy, another solar system to another really fast. Have you ever looked into that?
I have not. So like things like wormholes and stuff like that. I mean, I know what they are. I know enough to be dangerous, but I don't know enough to pontificate on how to effectively use them for traveling.
Interesting. Now, what is an exoplanet?
An exoplanet is a planet similar to the ones that we have in the solar system that's orbiting a distant star. So the planets in the solar system orbit Sol, which is the technical name for the sun. And then, but there's 300 billion stars in our galaxy, and what, like Avogadro's number of stars in the visible universe. And so similar to what happened in the solar system, a lot of these stars will have a protoplanetary disk and they'll form their own set of planets. The first one was discovered orbiting a star like the sun in 1995. There were a couple that had been discovered earlier than that, but they were orbiting neutron stars. So they were like second generation planets, where finding a planet that orbited a star like the sun, that was only what, I guess 30 years ago, which, okay, so it sounds like a long time, but it wasn't really that long ago.
No, but you said how many planets? In 300 billion?
Yeah, 300 billion stars in our galaxy, and they probably have, as far as we can tell, there's at least one planet per star in the galaxy, probably more than that, because there are regions around distant stars that we don't have the sensitivity to find planets, either because the planets are too small or they're too far away from the star. And so we'll get a better census as our instruments improve on how to detect them.
With our technology improving, yeah. You know, again, a couple of weeks ago, I heard something, and I didn't catch it all because I was in the hospital and I heard it. They talked about, you know, they got some light coming from one of these exoplanets, which they said maybe it's possibility of life. Is that possible?
I don't know the specific study you're referring to, but we have seen light from the atmosphere. We've seen light that's reflected off of the cloud layers of the different planets. We've seen light that's been kind of transmitted through the atmosphere. So kind of like the sunset, you know, looking at the sunset or an eclipse, a lunar eclipse, how the light from the sun goes through the atmosphere and then illuminates the moon. So we've seen those kinds of signatures, and we've been able to measure some of the composition that exists in the atmospheres of these distant planets.
What would these type of planets, what would they look like? What could they support life like we know?
Most of the ones that we've seen aren't really conducive for life. The main thing is, and this is actually kind of unusual, most of the planets that we've discovered outside the solar system don't look like the planets in the solar system. I mean, so they're round, but beyond that, they seem to be quite a bit different. The typical planet that we've been able to discover with, say, the Kepler mission, which my book is about, and the TESS mission, are planets that are a couple times the size of the Earth, so like 2 to 4 times the size of the Earth, and have a mass that's probably 5 to 10 times the mass of the Earth. And so they're quite a bit bigger than the Earth, but they're also smaller than Neptune. So they're in this intermediate range where there's no counterpart in our solar system to compare them to. So we're not totally sure, for example, if they're dominated by an atmosphere, if they have a thick atmosphere like Neptune and Uranus do, or if they maybe have a lot of water embedded in them, like Jupiter's moon Ganymede has, about half of Ganymede's mass is made out of water. So there's we don't know the details of the composition of these planets, and we don't really have a good analog in the solar system, partly because they're a different size and a different mass, but also because they orbit quite a bit closer to their host star even than Mercury orbits the sun. So Mercury orbits the sun every 3 months, but most of these planets orbit their stars every 3 weeks. So we have a lot to do to learn about, why these planets look the way they do, how they formed, what path that system took that was different than the solar system. So we still have a lot of unanswered questions.
What type of equipment does it take to find them?
All of the. So, for example, for the Kepler mission, what it was looking for is the planetary transit. So it was looking for the planet as it passes in front of the host star. That would be the equivalent of looking down at the city of Las Vegas from space and identifying individual bugs as they circle around the streetlights. And so it was looking for those planetary transits and then measuring. In that case, you can measure the size of the planet. There's also instruments where you measure the Doppler shift. As the planet and the star orbit each other, the star is moving towards the Earth and away from the Earth, following the planet's orbit or following their mutual orbit. And we can measure the Doppler shift of the star in those circumstances. So that's another way of measuring the presence of a planet. We can also see them in some circumstances, we can directly image the planets. We can see the light that's coming from the planets, but there's only a handful of systems that are conducive to that particular type of measurement, at least for now. It's an instrumentation issue that's really preventing further advances in that area. So there's a variety of different ways that we can measure the presence of planets. My personal favorite is the transit method because it allows you to measure really precise orbital periods. And by measuring the precise orbital periods, you can gain some idea about the history of the systems.
Interesting. Now, do they also have any capability to check for like radio waves or anything like that?
There are some like attempts to find kind of technosignatures, so either radio waves or like laser beams and things like that. Those are usually, those kinds of endeavors have quite a bit of private funding because they're high risk, high reward, but the high risk generally prevents a lot of national money to go towards that. So there is some money that comes from, you can imagine getting some NASA money for a grant that studies something like that. But for the most part, there's a lot of basic kind of planetary science or exoplanetary science that needs to get done that has a bit of a higher priority because it's a little less risky in terms of identifying something.
What is a high risk? What is that? Can you explain that?
What I mean by high risk is that it's the probability of seeing a new signature, so making some kind of new discovery. If you're trying to measure, for example, the composition of an atmosphere of a planet that has a given size, that has a fairly low risk because it's already been done before, and you might be pushing the technology a little bit, or kind of at the bleeding edge of what capabilities we have. But there's a high probability of successfully seeing a signature that hasn't yet been seen before. When it comes to, for example, looking for technosignatures or other signatures of life on other planets, the probability of any one star showing a signature is incredibly tiny, just because you would have to have another civilization and they would have to be able to communicate with us or send something out, and we'd have to be looking at the time when it's available. And so as a consequence, while the implications of a successful detection is really high, the probability of a successful detection is really low. And so as a funding agency, all funding agencies, they have to balance what's the probability of seeing something new against how transformative would that detection be.
Very interesting. So far, in all this time we've been doing research trying to find an exoplanet, what is the most Earth-like exoplanet that's been discovered so far?
That's a good question. I think it probably depends a little bit on how you define Earth-like. I know that, so there's a lot of hype around what's called the TRAPPIST system, TRAPPIST-1. So TRAPPIST was discovered by a ground-based transit survey, and then it was followed up with the Kepler Space Telescope. It wasn't part of the Kepler mission; it was part of the K2 mission, which was like a resurrected Kepler Space Telescope, and they were able to find a planetary system. I think it has 7 planets in it, and maybe as many as 4 of the planets are in what we would consider the habitable zone of that star. So those are ones that are getting a lot of attention. There's some other ones. I know that like Kepler 62, I believe, also has roughly Earth-sized planets in the habitable zone. In that case, it's a star that's much more similar to the sun. So there are a handful of planets that people are excited about for the possibility of life on them. And if that's what, so in terms of like life holding Earth-like planets, those are probably a couple of the major candidates.
Well, Dr. Jason, how do you and other scientists look at one of these exoplanets and try to figure out, could it support some type of life?
So there are a number of signatures that my colleagues look for. My personal research is primarily on the dynamics of the system and how the planets interact with each other. And so when it comes to searches for life, most of them right now, the most productive aspect or the productive area of exoplanet science that's kind of pushing in that direction is measuring the atmospheric composition. So being able to see what kind of chemicals are in the atmosphere, is there carbon dioxide, is there oxygen, is there ozone? Those are the primary things. And so the James Webb Space Telescope is instrumented well to make those kinds of detections. It can observe in the infrared, which is where a lot of these kind of more complex molecules are located. So for example, if you have a molecule like oxygen, it doesn't have emission in the infrared. So whenever you have like a dumbbell shaped molecule, so oxygen or nitrogen, they don't usually emit light in the infrared. But if you have a molecule that has 3 atoms in it, so water, ammonia, 3 or more, so water, ammonia, methane, ozone, something like that, those emit light in the infrared. And so that's what the James Webb Space Telescope is able to see, is some of these kind of greenhouse gas type molecules in the atmospheres of the planets.
How often have you seen these planets, like with methane?
So I know that it happens. I think carbon dioxide is one of the things that comes up fairly often, and that's partly because oxygen is so abundant in the universe. But that's not an area of the literature that I keep up to date only periodically, or I update my understanding of what the current situation is only periodically in that area.
Well, can you explain to me and to the listeners out there, what is the Goldilocks zone, and why is it important for us to investigate it?
So the Goldilocks zone, or the habitable zone, is the region around a star where you can imagine having the conditions that are conducive for life, and primarily liquid water on the surface. So in the solar system, Mars is probably on the edge of the habitable zone. So to some extent, this habitable zone depends on the properties of the planet that you're talking about. So if Mars was bigger, then it would probably retain an atmosphere that's a bit more substantial. It could have, you might be able to have life on Mars without needing to import it. If it was larger and was able to keep a hold of its atmosphere a little bit better. If Venus had a slightly different composition to its atmosphere, then it could also potentially be habitable. So we have examples in the solar system of planets that aren't currently habitable, but that with a few changes could be habitable. But in general, it's the region in a stellar system, or the region around a star where if a planet was there, it could have liquid water on the surface and therefore could have life.
Well, you mentioned Mars too. I mean, have you ever tried to figure out what happened to Mars? How did it lose its atmosphere? What happened to that planet?
The problem that Mars has is that it's such a wimpy planet. It has a mass that's only 10% of the mass of the Earth, and so it's not able to retain the lighter compounds in its atmosphere. So oxygen will break apart. It will lose all of its hydrogen. So if you had water on the surface of Mars, like in water vapor form, in large quantities, it would dissociate, and then the hydrogen would escape, and then now you've lost all the hydrogen, so you can't have the water anymore.
Well, can I ask you a question? If my producer went to Mars and unzipped his space suit and took a whiz on Mars, what would happen to the urine? Would it dissipate before it hit the ground?
No, it would just soak into the ground pretty quickly. There's subterranean water on Mars, so we know occasionally there will be little eruptions where we can see water that is flowing on the surface. So there is water on Mars. It's just underneath the surface. So there isn't the absence of surface water. The absence of a thick atmosphere means that it's hard to transport energy from one side of the planet to another. There's a little bit of that, but not a whole lot. And Mars is just it's unfortunate that it's the mass that it has. We don't know the real reason why Mars is so wimpy in that regard, because when we do our models of planet formation, which is some of the research that I do, we would have expected the planet that forms in the position where Mars is located to be larger than what we see, and in most cases even larger than the Earth. So for some reason in the history of the solar system, the region where Mars formed was depleted in material, and so Mars came out kind of anemic compared to what it by rights should have been.
Very interesting. Now, Doctor, we're going to take a break for about 4 minutes. When we come back, we got more questions to ask you. And then I got to ask you, what made you write this book? How long did it take? And all that. We'll be back in about 4 minutes with Dr. Jason. So stay tuned. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Again, check out our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. We're going to be right back.
Side. I'd only ever live a lie. When I'm with you, I come alive. I come alive. Yeah. You got that fire and you light me up. I promise I won't lay you down. We rule the world, we can have it all. Always together, I'll love you forever. What could be better than me and my babe? They'll say whatever, they're nothing but haters. What could be better than me and my babe? Without you, there's no me. I got you on replay all day. Down for whatever, no matter the weather, just me and my babe. Take it slow. Oh baby, I can blow your heart away. I'm tired of love.
Time slips. A haunted office building on a haunted street. A haunted coal town. Mysterious black cats. Unexplained light anomalies. UFOs, UAPs in the air and on the ground. Bridges in liminal spaces. Cryptids, shamans, and a werewolf. Disclosure: you don't need a ranch in Utah. All this and more happens in rural southwestern Pennsylvania. Coming soon from Haunted Hills and Hollows 1 and 2 author Kevin Paul, Politics and the Paranormal in Greene County, Pennsylvania. Available this fall on Amazon and at other fine booksellers. Take a journey of adventure and discovery for the enigmatic giants of the forests. Read On the Trail of Bigfoot by Mike Dupler. The author himself describes it this way.
Having found possible Sasquatch evidence, namely trees driven into the ground upside down, thought to be territory markers, led me to investigate this creature in my native Ohio. Several years and many forays into Bigfoot territory, I have found incredible evidence, which inspired my book, On the Trail of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is alive and has many fantastic abilities. The evidence is out there for all to see, but you need to know what to look for. My book will inspire those who have answered the call to seek this elusive creature, the Bigfoot. The truth is out there.
Read On the Trail of Bigfoot by Mike Dupler. Available now at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and IndieBound.org.
Hey, this is April, the psychic housewife of New Jersey. Listen to Night Dreams Talk Radio with Gary Anderson.
Beaming to you like a whirlwind. In syndication and on all the apps worldwide. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network.
And we are back with Dr. Jason. You know, it's so interesting to think out there, so many people are so naive. They think that our planet is the only planet that could ever support life. And I'm sure that's what you're trying to prove, isn't it, too, that life exists out there with all these exoplanets and planets in our solar system, and who knows what's out there. There's not a brick wall. There's going to be other planets and solar systems and stars and galaxies. Am I right?
Yeah, there's definitely lots of other planets that we could imagine, where we can imagine life developing. I mean, and one of the things that's important to consider, for example, in the solar system, I mean, we talked about the habitable zone, and it's, kind of like where you would have an Earth-like planet in an Earth-like orbit. But if you look at where we are looking for life in the solar system, only the Earth is in the habitable zone. So we think about looking at on Mars for signatures of life, or on Europa, or on Titan, or different places in the solar system that are not what would fall in the traditional habitable zone. So, one thing that we studied in my research group, because my research is primarily on the dynamics of the planets, how they interact with each other as they orbit. We know of planets that get kicked out of their solar systems. So you form a whole bunch of planets, the system goes unstable, and then some of them will get ejected. And one of the pieces of research that we did in my group was to examine whether a moon like Europa would stay like Europa, having liquid water under the surface, if Jupiter were ejected out of the system. And it turns out that it does. So you can imagine having a system where you form a planet like Jupiter, that planet gets kicked out, takes its moons with it, and now you've got a reservoir of liquid water that will persist for billions of years, but there's no star nearby. So it's completely driven by the dynamical interactions of the planets, or of the moons orbiting around that planet, rather than light from the star that's providing the energy.
That's very interesting. You remember the TV show years ago, Space 1999?
That one I don't remember that one.
Well, that's
sure it's great though.
That's the one where they had a moon base on the moon, and somehow it got blown out of, it where it was at, and it was just being a rogue, floating out there. Is it possible that like our moon something like that could happen?
If that happened to the moon, it would be not a good situation for the Earth, because it would be pretty disruptive for that to happen. One thing that's, I guess, along that line is we know that the solar system is not stable in the long term. Every billion years, there's about a 1% chance of Mercury's orbit crossing the Venus's orbit, and that would basically destabilize the whole inner solar system and potentially cause problems for the Earth.
Okay, what type of problems? Is it where I have to go underneath my bed, or am I gonna?
No, we'd all be dead, and it'd be pretty quick when that happened. So this is a
well, I mean, would we have enough time to read the Bible before it happens, or is it going to be like instantaneous? I mean, would we have days, hours, minutes?
Okay. So if we would be able to see Mercury going unstable pretty far into the future. The issue is, so a planetary system like the solar system is inherently chaotic, which means that very small perturbations to any one of the planetary orbits in the over a billion-year timescale can cause the solar system to be in a completely different positions. The planets will be, a small perturbation at one point, a billion years into the future, will cause it to be in a different state much later on. And the thing that is impacted the most in this circumstance is the eccentricity, like how elliptical Mercury's orbit is. And so a small change to its orbit now can cause the eccentricity to grow large enough to where it crosses Venus. Once it crosses Venus, then it could have a close interaction and then, come out and even potentially hit the Earth. So we would know a long time in the future whether Mercury was was headed in that trajectory. We can't make that prediction now because it would require measuring the positions of all the planets to a much, much higher precision than what we can currently measure. We'd have to know where Mercury is located to within the width of a human hair kind of thing. But as the time gets closer, we'd be able to see, this isn't looking good. And we might be able to do something, but it's hard to move a whole planet out of its orbit. It's one thing to move an asteroid out of its orbit a little bit. It's another thing to move a planet out of its orbit.
Well, maybe I would try to sell my beachfront property real fast before it hits. Planet X, again, I'm still confused because I've been doing this now 56 years, doing this type of radio show. And, for 56 years, Doctor, I've heard planet exists. No, it doesn't exist. Yes, it does. No, it don't. Yes, it does. Is there a chance that Planet X does exist?
So the name has moved from one object to another throughout that time. So when I was growing up, Planet X was like the planet Vulcan that was predicted a couple hundred years ago, a planet that orbits interior to the orbit of Mercury. That one we know doesn't exist. So there's no planet interior to Mercury. A few years ago, there was a prediction that there could be a planet, it goes by Planet 9, that is outside of the orbit of Neptune. And the reason that one was predicted is because of the orbits of some of the really distant trans-Neptunian objects. So this is like Eris and Biden, and there's a few other objects that are far in the, like way outside of the orbit of Neptune. And their orbits all are kind of aligned in the same direction in a way that the one explanation for why it's like that is that there might be a planet out there that would cause that would only allow those kinds of orbits to survive. So that Planet 9 prediction, which is sometimes called Planet X, depending on who's doing the reporting on it. So that one is still plausible. It hasn't been detected, so it's not, we don't know if it's there or not, but it could be there. But in terms of the original Planet X from when I was a kid, which was talking about if there was a planet that was either, there were two options. One of them is that it's a planet that's interior to the orbit of Mercury. That one doesn't exist. Another one is a planet that's like exactly opposite the Earth, and that one also doesn't exist. So the only additional planet that I know of that has been called Planet X is this one that would be way out in the distance.
Yeah, that's scary because again, the Mayas predicted of a planet like that it would appear every so often, which we're talking thousands of years when it would appear. If a planet, like Planet 9, Planet X, or whatever you want to call it, it did exist and came into, supposedly it's not quite in our solar system, but it does come in our solar system. I could be wrong on that. What would that do to our whole galaxy? What would it do to our planets? What would it do to Earth?
So for the case of if this Planet 9 does really exist, it's far enough away that it wouldn't really affect the Earth. It might affect, the thing that would affect the most would be disrupting objects in the Kuiper Belt, which is it's kind of like the asteroid belt, but it's made out of snowballs instead of rocks. And so when it comes in its close approach to the solar system, which is still farther out than Neptune is, so its orbit is, imagine a really wide orbit and then make it bigger. It could cause a disruption that would produce more comets in the inner solar system for a period of time. And so in that case, it would be, 4 comets in 10 years instead of 3. Another thing that can happen is that roughly every few million years, the typical time interval is something like 10 million years, where you'll have a star. That's the time scale where stars will pass each other in the galaxy. And so right now, the closest star to us is Alpha Centauri, which is a triple star system. So Proxima Centauri is the nearest star, but that's one member of a triple star system. And 10 million years from now, that's not going to be the closest star anymore. There will be another star that's closer than that. And so roughly every 10 million years, there is some new nearest star to the sun as we orbit around our galaxy. And those can also cause, if one of them gets too close, that can also cause a disruption to the objects in the outer part of the solar system. So that generally would result in an increase in the number of comets that we see in the inner solar system. But it's extremely rare to have things that are close enough to the inner planet, like to the planets from Neptune interior, to have something get close enough to cause a disruption there.
Very interesting, because, some scientists I've had on, like Michio Kaku, said if it exists, it could come and basically destroy our planet. But again, a lot of different people, string theory, all this, have their own, thoughts about it.
Yeah, you can cook up a scenario where you say, if a planet came into the inner solar system, then really bad things would happen. But the probability of these things happening is incredibly tiny. For my own, the things that keep me up at night in terms of celestial, like death by celestial object, the real concern is asteroids that haven't been identified yet, Earth-crossing asteroids that haven't been identified yet.
That's scary. That. We put all our money into military defense and everything else, which we should be putting money in, one, in the grid system, because, if the grid goes down, we're done there. The second is, of finding these asteroids and all this stuff out there, we're only looking at a small area in a window, and that's scary.
Yeah, and that happens. And actually the defense, so I think the Air Force is typically the group that, like the branch of the armed forces that funds that kind of research. So there's, for example, Pan-STARRS is running right now. I believe that LSST, which has been renamed as the Rubin telescope, is also going to be looking for like Earth-crossing asteroids. So that actually does happen. And while you can't identify, it's impossible to know for sure that you've identified everything. The way that it would work is you look for objects of a given size, and you count the rate that you discover new ones. And so when you first have a new telescope, you find a bunch of new ones right away. And then over time, you find fewer and fewer and fewer new objects. And that tells you what fraction of the objects you've actually discovered. So if you start off and you're finding one a month, and then in a few years you're only finding one, like one every 2 years, then you know that you've already identified the majority of the objects of that size. And so when they design these kinds of surveys, Pan-STARRS is the one that's currently most active. When you design those surveys, you basically say, we want this survey to identify 95% of the objects that are a given size, that are within a particular orbital range. And they can tell when they've reached that based upon how frequently new ones crop up.
It's the ones I really worry about. Back a couple of years ago, one hit the Mediterranean Ocean that said it wasn't going to even come near Earth, and it went right into the ocean. And there's been a couple other ones that said it wouldn't hit, and they hit. So, that is kind of scary. I got to ask you a question. What should the average person think? And should they even care about exoplanets in the first place? And what type of discoveries, and how could it impact you and me and everybody else?
Obviously everyone should care about it a lot, and they should encourage people in Congress to support the funding of studying exoplanets. The reasons I give for why the typical person might care about it is, one, because it is pretty awe-inspiring to know that there's other planets and planetary systems that are out there, and in particular to know that they're different than the solar system. So how does exoplanet science contribute to the body of human knowledge? One of the things it does is it allows us to compare the origins of other planetary systems to our own solar system. So we have a pretty good handle on the history of the solar system. But what we didn't have until a few years ago was a comparison. We didn't have a zoo, right? We had a single pet, but not a lot of animals to compare our pet to. And the discovery of exoplanets has kind of shown us the variety of systems that can be formed using the same physical laws. It's not like physics is different around a different star. Gravity is still there. You still have chemistry. You still have the nuclear forces holding everything together. And so by studying these distant planetary systems, we get some idea of how unique or maybe how abundant systems like the solar system are and planets like the Earth are. And then it also shows us the paths that the solar system didn't take in its formation and dynamical evolution.
Now, did these start from these planets, exoplanets? Was that left over from the Big Bang or the pre-Big Bang or what?
So it's more, the planet formation happens after the formation of the galaxy. So our galaxy is something on the order of 10 billion years old. So that's quite a bit after the Big Bang. It's not really influenced by, aside from the fact that the Big Bang seeded the gravitational wells that eventually formed the galaxies. Planet formation happens on a pretty short time scale. So while the solar system is 5 billion years old, the planets were in their locations in basically 500 million years. And the planets that are important in the solar system, okay, so the Earth is important to us, but in terms of like where's all the planetary mass, it's all in Jupiter. Jupiter is more massive than all the other planets combined. Jupiter formed within a couple million years after the sun formed. And so the big planets form very quickly, and then the small planets form afterwards. And so most of the solar system was kind of already in place within a 500 million years after the sun formed, which is, within 10% of the sun's life up to this point, right? So that's only 5% of the total lifetime of the sun. And so the same thing is going to happen with other planetary systems. They're going to form over time scales that are relatively short compared to the lifetime of the star that they're orbiting around.
Now, when I was a young kid, I asked my grandmother, which I thought she was a genius, the planets out there, is it something that really, like if you watch Star Trek or Star Wars or any of these type of movies, do the planets stop at one point, or is it possibility that it goes on for never ending?
The planets, so they'll keep going as long as gravity is there. So there's no reason for us to think that anything's going to happen to the planets in terms of the orbits. A few things at the end of the stars of the sun's life. Two things are going to happen. One is the sun is going to expand in size, and the other one is going to lose a lot of mass. So the sun will lose about half of its mass as it goes through its late stages of its evolution. And it will grow to a size that's something on the order of 1,000 times larger than it currently is. So there's two things that are going to happen as a consequence. As the sun loses its mass, the orbit of the Earth is going to expand. And the orbit of all the planets are going to expand because there's less mass in the middle, so their orbits are going to relax, basically. And then the sun is going to expand in size, which means it could engulf some of the planets. And Mercury will be engulfed, Venus will be engulfed, but the Earth is right at the edge where it's conceivable that if the sun loses mass fast enough, that the Earth will survive the giant branch phase of the sun's life. But if the sun doesn't lose mass fast enough and it grows in size too fast, then the Earth could be engulfed. So the Earth is, we still don't know what the long-term fate of the Earth is as the sun goes into its late stages of life. Eventually the sun is going to die, and if the Earth survives everything else, then it will just get cold, but otherwise it will still be there.
Yeah, but we won't be.
We won't be, which is unfortunate, but it's not really a pressing issue because it's 5 billion years into the future.
Yeah, but again, how accuracy? Accurate is 5 billion years. I mean, could they be off by about 450 billion years?
They could be off by, you may be off by 1 billion years. But a billion years is, so as far as we can tell, modern humans have been on the planet for, something on the order of 100,000 years. So this is, what is that, 10,000 times longer than humans have been on the Earth.
Yeah, but won't the temperatures of Earth too start varying too? Or before that happens, it's going to get hotter and hotter?
Yeah, so the sun is getting brighter. So that's going to be an issue. It might mean that we don't live in Nevada for, more than a few 100,000 years. But I think when it comes to what are the problems that are pressing, that's not really something that I worry about. I mean, by that time, the continents will be in different places, and so the weather patterns will be different. There's going to be a lot of changes that happen.
Well, we might not even be here the way things are going anyway. But I got to ask you before we let you go, too, what are some of the challenges that you and your colleagues go through trying on, studying these planets?
So I think the big questions that we're facing right now is understanding what the planets themselves are made of. So we expect that they're made out of similar elements to what the Earth is made out of. I mean, it's going to be made out of carbon and oxygen and iron and magnesium and things like that. But are the ratios of those elements different than the Earth? So you can have pretty substantial variations in the composition of stars. So you can, for example, have a star that has, say, twice as much carbon as the sun has, or half as much oxygen as the sun has, or something like that. And that chemistry, when you have different initial abundances to form minerals from, you're going to form different minerals. And so one of the things that we do in my group is look at what would happen if we were in a really carbon-rich environment. Would we get a planet that's made out of carbon, or like diamond, or would we get a planet that's made out of something else? What happens if you don't have enough oxygen? What happens if you change the amount of nitrogen? If you change a lot of nitrogen, then does that affect the chemistry of the mantle? And then ultimately, the questions that would lead to is, okay, if you change the chemistry of the mantle, does that change the probability of plate tectonics? And if you change plate tectonics, then that affects the ability to bring materials up from the mantle into the oceans that you can then use to build living organisms from. So some of those are questions that my research touches on some of that stuff. We also are looking at how different are the internal dynamics of planets that are larger than the Earth, because we see a substantial number of super Earths that might be 3 times the mass of the Earth and 1.5 times the size. We don't know if plate tectonics would be common in those planets. We don't know, for example, how easy it is to form a moon on planets that are orbiting a lot closer to the sun than the Earth is orbiting, because that's most of the planets that we see are closer to their host star than the Earth is to the sun. So there's a lot of issues related to habitability, for example, that we haven't had the time yet to really flesh out in these other planetary systems.
A lot to think about. How long did it take you, Doctor, to write your book?
So the book, so it's Hidden in the Heavens, about the Kepler mission. It took me probably about 18 months to write it down and go through the revisions, maybe a year to write it, and then 6 months of revisions. And I had to go through and read my emails to make sure that I was quoting people correctly. And then, of course, that sends you down the rabbit hole of like, oh, I remember this discussion. And then you spend a lot of time reading your old emails instead of writing the book. But it was about a year in real development, and then making it so that it didn't sound like it was make it sound a little bit better, a little bit easier to read.
Where is it available at?
The easiest place to get it is probably Amazon, but it's available through, you can order it online through Barnes & Noble or something like that. I don't know which stores it's in, but it's through Princeton University Press, and so it has a pretty wide circulation.
Now, do you have a website or anything to share?
I do have a website. It's jasonhsteffen.com. And that's a website. That's my research website. So it shows the results that are coming out of my research group and other things that are going on within my professional career.
Interesting. Now, one last question before I let you go, Jason. The moon. Was the moon part of this Earth, or was it something that got pulled into our?
That is a question that was, in principle, was settled until a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that's why I asked you.
So the prevailing model is that the moon formed through a collision with a proto-Earth and a Mars-sized objects colliding, and then the debris field that was produced in that collision ultimately formed the moon. I'm still kind of leaning in that direction as the primary, the most plausible mechanism to form the moon. But there was a paper that came out not long ago, like within the last couple months, where they were looking at the composition of the moon in certain minerals that formed on the moon and certain minerals that formed on the Earth, and the composition is sufficiently similar that it would favor a form that the Earth and the moon formed at the same time out of the same material. So I don't know which story to believe. I suspect that 5 years from now, it might change up a little bit more. But the jury's still out on how the moon formed.
You mean it's not a planet that is actually formed by ETs and it's a spaceship? That's what some people believe.
I
don't
doubt
buy
that it's
that
a
one.
spaceship, because we can see the seismic activity and stuff, so we know what the inside of the moon looks like. And so, but whether it formed at the same time from the same material, or whether it formed from a collision, or maybe the object that maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe this Theia object that is, at least historically, been the primary culprit for forming the moon. If it formed in a region that's close enough to where the Earth formed, then it would have a similar enough composition to probably explain these recent observations. But the jury's still out. We're still working on it.
Okay. Well, let us know if you ever find that out. Doctor, I want to thank you so much. For more information about his book, go to our website, nightdreamstalkradio.com. You drive safely when you go back home, will you?
I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, my friend. You take care. Well, tomorrow, who do we have on the show?
Well, tomorrow, Mr. Gary, we're going to have a really good show, because Mr. Ryan Morris is going to come on, and he's going to be talking about, well, his theory of what UFOs are and where they're coming from.
Where are they coming from? I don't think they're coming from Mars. They're not little green men.
No, or your Aunt Bertha's backyard either.
No, you mean Aunt Bertha that played the saxophone in the nudist camp?
Yeah, the one that kept
the one that got in trouble for blowing it so hard.
Yeah, she kept her flowers on the
I don't know. But you know what? I tell you, I learned a lot tonight. How about you about exoplanets?
Oh, yeah. Listen, Dr. Jason Steffen, man, he's great. Listen, there's an authority. You want to bring authority on with their subject matter? There you go, man. Exoplanets and Kepler. It was fantastic.
And please give us a thumbs up tonight. If you haven't subscribed to our channel and you're listening and not on chat, which a lot of you do, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about us, and please, after the show's all over, just go to our channel page and leave a comment about the show. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Actually, I'm feeling better, JC, than I have in months, actually. I don't know. I'm more back in the game tonight.
I'm glad to hear that. And it's very fitting. We got a great guest tonight. And so everything came together.
And tomorrow we're going to talk about UFOs, UAPs, flying discs, flying saucers. Who knows? My Aunt Bertha's stealing a UFO. We're going to be talking about that. Do UFOs exist? The panic on TikTok and all the media back a couple weeks ago about these drones. It is a false flag. A lot of the people out there, a lot of famous ufologists are making all these claims about false flags going on right now and misinformation. I tell you right now, if you're into UFOs and you're a ufologist, I tell you it's more confusing and more battling going on than I've seen in 56 years. And I'll tell you what, maybe tomorrow night with our guests, we can find out a little bit more what in the heck is going on. Everybody out there, again, I want to thank you for tuning in to the show. Everybody have a good one. We will catch you on the other side tomorrow. So tell your friends about us.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news.